Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit heavy, but honestly, it's so important and something we all need to wrap our heads around better. The not-so-sweet truth about sugar. We'll be looking at this based on a report called Why Sugar is Bad for Humanity. Have you ever really thought about how much sugar is a part of our lives and what that even means? Like the ripple effects.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. It's everywhere you know. It's so easy to just not even realize how much of it is around us and
Yeah.
what it's doing.
Totally. And this report doesn't hold back. One of the craziest things I learned about was this thing called a glycation process. Sounds super technical,
Hmm.
but it's actually pretty easy to understand.
It is a kind of complicated word, but it's a really important idea. Essentially, sugar molecules in your body, they kind of act like little vandals,
Yeah.
latching onto proteins, and those proteins are so important. Things like collagen and elastin, they keep your skin firm and elastic. And your blood vessels and even your organs, too.
So sugar is making us wrinkle faster. A&D messing with our insides.
Yeah.
That's like a double whammy.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true. And over time, this whole glycation thing, it creates these compounds called advanced glycation end products, AGs, which are basically like rust accumulating in your body, causing inflammation and damage at the cellular level.
Oh, wow, that's a powerful way to think about it. So it's not just about wrinkles and sagging skin. It could be damaging our organs and affecting our overall health.
Exactly. Chronic inflammation from AGs. It's connected to all kinds of chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, even Alzheimer's
I
disease.
had no idea it was so serious.
Yeah.
Makes you think twice about that extra scoop of ice cream.
It does, and it can really affect our mental health too. Not just that sugar rush and then the crash afterward. The report talks about how sugar can make things like depression and anxiety even worse over time.
Okay, so sugar messes with our skin, our organs, and our minds.
Yeah.
Is there anything it doesn't affect?
Well, that's the thing about sugar. It has such a broad impact. And it's often pretty subtle. Like, did you know that eating too much sugar can actually weaken your immune system?
Really? I always thought of sugar as like a guilty pleasure, not something that could actually make me more likely to get sick.
It might sound surprising, but it's true. Too much sugar suppresses the activity of white blood cells, which are your body's main defense against infections. This effect can last for several hours after you eat something sugary, so you're more vulnerable to things like colds and the flu.
So basically that cookie could be setting me up for a cold later on. That's not a risk I'm willing to take.
It's all about understanding the risks and making informed choices. And when you connect these individual health issues to the bigger picture, you can see how all this sugar is contributing to things like diabetes and heart disease, which are global health crises that put a huge strain on healthcare systems.
Yeah, and this report talks about how these problems actually affect low-income populations more than others, which just seems so unfair.
It is a really important point. Sugary food and drinks are often cheaper and more readily available in low-income communities,
Hmm.
and they are heavily marketed to those populations as well. So it's this complex web of factors that creates health disparities.
It's like there's this system that's making it harder for certain groups to make healthy choices. Speaking of systems, the report also mentions how the sugar industry has worked really hard to downplay the risks of sugar, like funding misleading research and lobbying campaigns.
Right. It is a reminder to be critical of information, especially when powerful industries have a stake in controlling the narrative. The good news is, with more awareness, we can make more informed choices.
I completely agree. We've talked about how sugar affects our bodies and minds, and how it's linked to serious health problems, both individually and globally. But there's another side to this story, one that I think gets overlooked a lot, the environmental impact.
Yeah, sugar's environmental impact is really significant. Growing sugarcane, which is where most sugar comes from, it uses a ton of land, water, and pesticides. It contributes to deforestation, habitat loss, and water pollution.
And the report mentioned that it's also tied to labor exploitation in some parts of the world, which is a serious ethical issue.
Absolutely. The demand for cheap sugar often comes at a high cost to the environment and to the people who work in the sugar industry. And we can't forget about food waste either, which is also connected to the overproduction of all these sugary foods and
It's
drinks.
like a chain reaction of negative consequences. It's
Hmm.
starting to feel a little bleak, isn't it?
It can feel overwhelming, but awareness is the first step towards change. Knowing the full impact of sugar, it gives us the power to make better choices and advocate for a healthier future.
So what can we do? How do we deal with a world where sugar is everywhere and make choices that are good for us and line up with our values?
That's a great question, and
Yeah.
it's one we'll talk about more after a short.
Wait, before we go there, I want to hear more about this whole fructose thing. You mentioned that it's especially bad. but I'm not sure I really get why.
Sure, fructose is a type of sugar. It's found naturally in fruits and honey, but it's also a big part of high fructose corn syrup, which is a sweetener used in tons of processed foods and drinks. The problem with fructose is that our bodies process it differently than glucose, which is another type of sugar. Glucose can be used by all the cells in your body for energy, but fructose is mainly processed by the liver.
Okay, so what happens when our liver gets overloaded with fructose? That can't be good.
You're right, it's not good. When we eat too much fructose, our liver can't keep up, and it starts turning that extra fructose into fat. This can cause something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, which is becoming more and more common, even in kids.
Too much fructose can actually make our livers fatty. That's kind of scary.
It is. And NAFLD can lead to more serious liver problems down the line, like cirrhosis and liver failure.
Wow, okay. I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to that. So how do we avoid this fructose overload? Is it just about cutting back on processed foods and sugary drinks?
That's a great place to start. Choosing whole, unprocessed foods as much as possible will naturally reduce your fructose intake, but it's also important to watch out for added sugars, even in foods that you might not expect.
So reading labels is important.
It is. You'd be surprised how much sugar is hiding in processed foods, even things that seem healthy.
It's like being a sugar detective.
Exactly. And sugar can be sneaky. It can hide in things like yogurt, granola bars, salad dressings, even bread.
Got it. So what about when you just really want something sweet? Do we have to live without any treats at all?
Not at all. It's all about moderation and making informed choices. If you are going to have something sweet, go for things with natural sugars, like fruit, and be mindful of how much you're eating.
So like a small piece of dark chocolate is better than a giant piece of cake.
Generally speaking, yes, dark chocolate actually has some health benefits because of the antioxidants, but again, moderation is key.
Okay, so reading labels, choosing whole foods, and watching those sweet treats. Are there any other strategies we can use, like for people who really struggle with sugar cravings?
That's a common struggle. And there are definitely things you can do. One thing that can really help is gradually reducing your sugar intake instead of going cold turkey, which can often backfire. Try slowly decreasing the amount of sugar you add to your coffee or tea, for example.
That's a good idea. I've always tried to just cut it out completely, and it never seems to work.
It's much more sustainable that way. Your taste buds will adjust over time, and you'll find yourself craving less sweetness.
I like that. So what about when those cravings hit out of nowhere? Any quick tips to help resist?
One thing that can help is paying attention to when you eat sugary things. If you eat them on an empty stomach, your blood sugar spikes really quickly, which can trigger cravings and make you crash later.
So it's better to have something sweet after a meal than as a snack on its own.
Exactly. Having those sweet treats with some protein and fiber can help your body absorb the sugar more slowly and keep your blood sugar levels stable so you'll feel more satisfied and less likely to want more sugar later.
That makes sense. It's all about balance.
Exactly. It's not about never having sugar. It's about finding a way to enjoy it that supports your overall health and well-being. And that includes being aware of the emotional and psychological side of our relationship with sugar.
Yeah, that emotional connection to food. We can't ignore that. Sometimes it's not even about being hungry. It's about trying to feel better or deal with stress.
You're right. Sugar can be a quick fix when you're feeling down, but it doesn't last. It's important to find healthy ways to cope with stress and emotions that don't involve turning to sugar.
So what are some healthier ways to deal with those feelings, besides just saying no to that ice cream?
There are so many great options. Doing things you enjoy, spending time with people you care about, mindfulness or meditation, even therapy if you need it. There are lots of paths to feeling better that don't rely on sugar.
It's about getting to the root of the problem, instead of just covering it up with sugar.
Exactly.
But let's be real. It's easier said than done. We all have moments of weakness.
Of course. We all slip up sometimes. The key is to be kind to yourself. Learn from those experiences and keep going.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. By thinking long term, we can create healthy habits that will last.
I love that. So we've talked about what individuals can do to cut back on sugar. But what about the bigger picture? What can we do as a society to address this problem? It feels so huge and systemic.
You're right. It's a complex issue. Like we discussed earlier, the sugar industry has a lot of power. It influences our food system and how we think about health. They've done a very good job of protecting their interests, even when it means public health suffers.
So how do we fight back? How do we create a level playing field and make things healthier for everyone?
Well, advocating for policies that make healthy food more accessible is crucial. Things like taxes on sugary drinks, restrictions on marketing unhealthy food to kids, and subsidies for healthier options.
Those are great ideas. But how do we actually make them happen? It feels like such an uphill battle.
It can feel that way, but change is possible. It starts with raising awareness and having conversations like this one. When we educate ourselves and others about the harms of sugar, we create a demand for change.
And then we can pressure our elected officials to prioritize public health over corporate interests.
Exactly. It's about using our voices to advocate for a healthier future, for ourselves and for future generations. And that includes supporting organizations that are working to improve our food system and promote healthy eating habits.
There's so many great organizations out there doing amazing work, educating people, advocating for change, and empowering people to make healthier choices. We need to support them.
Absolutely. It takes effort at every level. Individual action, collective action, and systemic change. It all works together.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. I've learned so much about sugar and its impacts.
I'm glad to hear that.
Mhm.
Knowledge is power. And when we understand the complexities of an issue, we can make better choices and push for positive change.
It can be overwhelming to think about how big this problem is, but even small changes can make a difference.
They really can. Every step we take to reduce our sugar intake and support a healthier food system is a step in the right direction.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. The science, the societal impact, personal stories, and the potential benefits of cutting back on sugar. Before we wrap things up, what are some key takeaways you want listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that sugar is more than just a sweet treat. It has a huge impact on our health, our society, and our planet.
And while we don't need to eliminate it completely, we do need to be mindful of how much we're consuming and make choices that align with our values and our health goals.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance that supports our well-being and contributes to a healthier and more sustainable world.
I love that. Now, before we get too philosophical about the role of sugar in modern society.
Before we get into all that, there's one more thing from the report that I think is really important. The impact of all this sugar on kids.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It said something about how early exposure to sugar can set kids up for health problems their whole lives. That's kind of scary to think about.
It is concerning. Kids are especially vulnerable to the negative effects of sugar because their bodies are still developing. Eating a lot of sugar when they're young can contribute to all sorts of issues: weight gain, tooth decay, even problems with how their brains work. And it increases their risk of chronic diseases later on.
And it's not just about those immediate health effects either. The report talked about how it can actually change their taste preferences and their eating habits in the long run.
That's right. When kids get used to those super sweet processed foods from a young age, it can make it harder for them to enjoy the natural sweetness of fruits and vegetables. So they end up preferring those processed foods and sugary drinks. And it becomes this cycle of unhealthy eating habits.
It's like we're setting them up for failure before they even start.
It's not about blame. It's about understanding the problem
Yeah.
and trying to create a healthier environment for kids so they can thrive.
So what can we do about all this? Where do we even begin to tackle this sugar problem? It feels like it's everywhere.
Well, the good news is that even small changes can make a difference. One of the easiest and most effective things you can do is start reading labels carefully. You'd be surprised how much sugar is hidden in processed foods, even stuff that seems pretty healthy.
Okay, so reading labels is key.
Sure.
But what should we be looking out for? Are there any red flags that tell us something is loaded with sugar?
Absolutely. Look at the ingredient list and watch out for words that end in O's, like sucrose, glucose, fructose, dextrose, maltose. Those are all types of sugar. Also be on the lookout for high fructose corn syrup. That's a really common sweetener in processed foods and drinks.
Gotcha, so it's like being a detective.
Exactly. And remember, sugar can be sneaky. It can hide in unexpected places, like yogurt, granola bars, salad dressings, even bread.
Okay, I'll keep my eyes peeled. But what about those times when you just really crave something sweet? Are we doomed to a life without treats?
Not at all. It's about moderation and smart choices. If you want to have something sweet, go for things made with natural sugars, like fruit. And just pay attention to how much you're eating.
So a little bit of dark chocolate is a better choice than a big slice of cake.
Generally speaking, yes. Dark chocolate has some health benefits, too, because of the antioxidants. But again, it's all about not overdoing it.
Okay, so reading labels, choosing whole foods, and being mindful about those sweet treats. What else can we do? What about people who struggle with sugar cravings?
That's a common problem. And there are things you can do to manage those cravings. One surprisingly effective tactic is to gradually reduce your sugar intake over time, instead of trying to quit cold turkey, which can often make things harder. Try slowly cutting back on the amount of sugar you add to your coffee or tea, for example.
That's a good point. I've always tried to just cut it out completely, and it never seems to stick.
It's a much more sustainable approach. Your taste buds will adjust, and you'll naturally want less sweetness.
I like that. So what about when those cravings hit you unexpectedly? Are there any quick things you can do to resist?
One helpful tip is to think about when you're eating those sugary things.
Mhm.
If you eat them on an empty stomach, it causes a rapid spike in your blood sugar, which can make you crave more and then you crash later.
So it's better to have something sweet after a meal rather than by itself.
Exactly. Eating those sweet treats with some protein and fiber can help slow down sugar absorption and stabilize your blood sugar, so you'll feel more satisfied and less likely to crave more later.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's all about balance. It's not about demonizing sugar. It's about finding a way to enjoy it in a way that supports your overall health and well-being. And that includes being aware of how sugar affects us emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah, that emotional connection to food. It's real. Sometimes we're not even physically hungry. We just want to feel better or deal with stress.
Absolutely. Sugar can be a quick fix for those negative emotions, but it doesn't really solve the problem. It's important to find healthy ways to cope with stress and emotional challenges that don't involve reaching for sugar.
So what are some healthier ways to deal with those feelings? Besides giving in to that ice cream craving.
There are lots of great alternatives. Doing things you enjoy, spending time with loved ones, practicing mindfulness or meditation, seeking therapy if you need it. There are many ways to feel better that don't involve relying on sugar.
It's about addressing the real issue, not just masking it with sugar.
Exactly.
But let's be honest, it's easier said than done. We're all human. We all have those moments of weakness.
Of course, it's okay to slip up sometimes. The key is to be kind to yourself. Learn from those experiences and keep moving forward.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. By focusing on the long term, we can create healthy habits that will stick.
I like that. So we've talked about individual strategies for reducing sugar. But what about the bigger picture? What can we do as a society to address this sugar problem? It feels so big and overwhelming.
It's a complex issue. Like we talked about earlier, the sugar industry has a lot of influence over our food system and how we think about health. They've been very good at protecting their interests, even when it means public health suffers.
So how do we fight back? How do we create a fairer system that makes healthy choices easier for everyone?
Well, advocating for policies that promote healthier food environments is crucial. We need to push for things like taxes on sugary drinks, restrictions on marketing sugary foods to children, and subsidies that make healthier foods more affordable.
Those are great ideas. But how do we actually get those things to happen? It feels like an uphill battle.
It can feel that way, but change is possible. It starts with raising awareness and having conversations like this. When we educate ourselves and others about the real costs of sugar, we create demand for change.
And then we need to put pressure on our elected officials to put public health before corporate interests.
Exactly. We need to use our voices to advocate for a healthier future, for ourselves and for generations to come. And that also means supporting organizations that are working to make our food system better and helping people develop healthy eating habits.
There are so many amazing organizations out there.
Absolutely. It takes effort at every level. Individual action, collective action, systemic change, it all works together.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. I feel like I've learned so much about sugar and its impact.
I'm glad to hear that. Knowledge is power. When we understand these complex issues, we can make more informed choices and push for real change.
Yeah, it can be kind of overwhelming to think about the scale of the problem.
Yeah,
But it's good to remember that even small changes can make a difference.
they really can. Every step we take to reduce our sugar intake.
And support a healthier food system is a step in the right direction.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. The science, the societal impact, personal stories, and the benefits of cutting back on sugar. Before we move on, what are some of the key takeaways you want our listeners to leave with? I think the most important takeaway is that sugar is much more than just a sweet treat. It has a profound impact on our health, our society, and even the planet.
And while we don't need to cut it out completely, we need to be mindful of how much we're consuming and make choices that align with our values and our health goals.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance that supports our well-being
Yeah.
and contributes to a healthier and more sustainable world for everyone.
Beautifully said. Now, before we dive too deep into the philosophical implications of all this, so before we, go down that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to us. Like, what can we expect to see in our own lives? when we start making these changes and cutting back on sugar?
Yes. The rewards of a less sugary life.
I'm all ears. Hit me with the good news.
One of the first things you'll probably notice is that you have more energy. When you're not constantly on that sugar roller coaster, with those spikes and crashes, your energy levels will be much more stable throughout the day.
So no more afternoon slump, no more needing a candy bar just to function. I'm sold.
Exactly. Stable blood sugar means no more energy dips, and you'll be able to focus and get more done.
That's huge. I bet that also means better sleep, too. Because I know when I've had too much sugar, I don't sleep well at all.
You're right. Cutting back on sugar often leads to better sleep. When your blood sugar is stable, your body can relax and go through those natural sleep cycles without being disrupted by sugar.
Okay, so more energy, better sleep. This is already sounding good. What else?
Well, let's talk about something that I know a lot of people care about, your appearance. Reducing your sugar intake can do wonders for your skin.
Oh, really?
Think less acne, a more radiant complexion, and even fewer wrinkles.
Wait, did you say fewer wrinkles? Now you're talking.
It's true. Remember those AGEs we talked about, the ones that damage collagen and elastin? Well, when you eat less sugar, you reduce the formation of those harmful compounds, which helps protect your skin and keep it looking younger.
Okay, I'm convinced. Fewer wrinkles, that's all the motivation I need. And I'm guessing this also ties into weight management, too.
It does. Cutting back on sugar can be a game changer for your weight. When you cut out those empty calories from sugary drinks and processed foods, you naturally reduce your overall calorie intake, which can lead to weight loss.
And I bet when you're not constantly craving sugar, it's easier to make healthier food choices in general.
Exactly. And as you lose weight, you often see improvements in other areas of your health as well. You lower your risk of things like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and certain types of cancer.
It's like this cascade of positive changes. Reducing sugar, losing weight, improving your overall health.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the mental and emotional benefits. Reducing sugar can have a big impact on your mood, focus, and sense of well-being.
Yeah, I've noticed that when I eat less sugar, I feel less anxious and more stable emotionally. Like my mood is more even throughout the day.
That's a common experience. When you stabilize your blood sugar and reduce inflammation, you create a more balanced internal environment. And that supports mental and emotional well-being.
So it's not just about physical health, it's about feeling better mentally and emotionally too.
Exactly. And as we're making these changes for ourselves, we're also contributing to a healthier planet.
Right. Remember all those negative environmental impacts of sugar production?
Yeah.
When we reduce our demand for sugar, we can help minimize those problems. Deforestation, pesticide use, water pollution, even the ethical concerns around labor practices.
It's about taking a stand for ourselves and for the planet.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a win-win. And when you look at the economics of it, reducing sugar consumption can have huge benefits for society as a whole.
Because when people are healthier, it means lower healthcare costs, right?
Exactly. When we lower our risk of chronic diseases, we reduce the burden on our healthcare systems, which frees up resources for other important things, and healthier populations are more productive, which is good for the economy.
So it's this holistic approach, recognizing that our health, our society, and our environment, they're all connected.
Exactly. And it all starts with making those conscious choices about sugar. This deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I've learned so much about sugar and its impact, from the bitter truth to the sweet possibilities.
I agree. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to make some positive changes in their own lives.
We talked about reading labels, choosing whole foods, managing cravings, finding healthier ways to cope with stress, even advocating for policy changes. It's been a journey.
It has, and it's important to remember that this is a process. It's not about being perfect. It's about making sustainable changes that work for you.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question. What's one small step you can take today to reduce your sugar intake and start your journey towards a healthier, sweeter future?
That's a great question. It's all about those small steps, one at a time, building momentum towards a better life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the world of sugar. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay sweet, but not too sweet.